Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay. Never comes again, another day like yesterday. Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.
Good afternoon, mon cher and mon frère. I'm going to talk a little bit about complex PTSD and one of the most challenging boundaries or hurdles to fully recovering from complex PTSD. And the reason for this is because, well, one of the larger, bigger picture reasons is because complex PTSD is complex because all of the trauma and all of the experiences was woven throughout childhood when we're building identities, when we're building beliefs, when we're building paradigms about the world, paradigms about self, paradigms about love. And so when you're attempting to recover from that, you don't just have, oh, I fear this thing that triggers this response in me. We fear this thing, this external event, the stimuli, someone screaming, a certain facial expression, whatever, that triggers this response in me. But in addition to the trauma response, there's shame responses and identity beliefs and paradigms being activated. They're very complex and interwoven into our personalities and our belief about who and what we are. That makes it much more stubborn. I need to down some water. I just got back from a walk. Excuse me, guys. Sorry about that. We're very informal today. I forgot my connector for my mic, so I'm just using the Max speaker, so it's not going to sound as good. But I had some time and decided to get another one on the books. So I recorded this statement recently, and you guys are going to want to take this with a grain of salt, or take this with maybe I'm projecting my own perceptions or my own way of relating to myself. I've had friends tell me that I'm super hard on myself or that I shame myself. And this statement is somewhat, I use language as somewhat harsh, but it helps me delineate the edges of the thing, right? So if the descriptive words are too strong or sound harsh to you, don't take it to heart that it's about you. It's how I generally tend to talk, especially when I've had realizations. I like really clear, descriptive language with some emotional punch that really helps me draw the shape of the thing that I'm describing. So people go through this long process of complex PTSD. Complex PTSD almost always, in fact, I'm not aware of a time that it didn't, involves lots of gaslighting. And so the person has been shamed for their trauma response. They've been shamed for their responses to being hurt, abused, mistreated. They've been taught and told that it's their fault, that it's actually they were just too sensitive or whatever. There's a multitude of ways that people shame the victim and blame the victim. One more. And so people go through this process where when they come in, they realize something's wrong, but often they've been gaslit so badly that they don't even realize they've lived through anything difficult. They've been told that all of their responses are their fault, there's something wrong with them, and they continue to struggle as adults. And so they come into therapy and generally they're like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, my childhood was generally fine. My parents are fine. You know, I have a good relationship with them. Sure, they're human, but I had a pretty nice childhood, et cetera, et cetera. And they're really baffled by what they're experiencing. And then there's this slow evolution, right? A therapist has to gently explore their experiences and begin to introduce the possibility that what you experienced isn't really that normal, and that your parents may be minimizing or dismissing really abusive things that they did that would have a significant impact on anyone, and that maybe some of what you're experiencing is related to parents behaving inappropriately. And generally these people, they don't want to hear the word abuse. They don't, it's like, yeah, I'm not interested in blaming my parents. But slowly over time, they'll go through this process, and they will even at some point really begin to realize how devastating and damaging and deeply toxic and confusing their parents' abuse was, and that they've struggled terribly, and that they've paid a terrible price for this behavior, for their for what they experienced, and that it confused them, and it taught them a bunch of things that were wrong about themselves and about other people that make life very difficult. And they also have these overwhelming flashbacks and panic attacks and problems with depressive episodes that last for 6 months and almost threatens their job or their relationship. Like, they realize, oh my God, like I'm a mess because of this, and it wasn't my fault. And they're really, really angry at their parents or whoever abused them. And that's healthy. They need to, right? If they've never been angry, they need to be angry. And the world can go, well, you're just blaming the parents, and, okay, you had a hard childhood. You can just sit there and, whine about it. You go whine to some therapist about how mean your mom was. Like, the world's going to do all that shit, and the world can shut the fuck up, because there is a process in which any of those responses, the denial can be appropriate for where you are. The exploration and confusion about what it is can be appropriate. The self-blame is a part of the process. An intense rage and anger at the parents is appropriate. It's appropriate. A lot of those parents deserve that rage. It's just that ultimately that person is going to have to get over that, because being in a state of rage, chronic rage, is incredibly bad for your body and for your brain, and it results in more anxiety and more depression and autoimmune diseases and blah, blah, blah. And so ultimately the therapist is going to try to walk them into a healthier relationship to what they happen, to focus more on, but you're actually a pretty resilient person, and you're a good person, and you're ethical, and that's pretty amazing given what you came from, and you've done a lot, and nobody would expect you to become the president of the United States. Well, actually, we have a complete abuse victim, toxic narcissist who did become a president of the United States. So maybe that is a reasonable expectation. I don't know. But the point is it's like, it's not surprising if you've lived way smaller than you think you should, if you know that you're smarter than your life reflects, and you're more talented, and you can't figure out how the fuck did this happen, right? In that process, you're going to explore that, and the therapist is going to hopefully help you evolve into a place where you're more forgiving and kind towards yourself. And you realize, wow, like I'm expecting way too much, and I really have already survived an enormous amount, and I really like myself, I respect myself, and I just want to live my life with joy and care and love and connection, right? And that's great. But somewhere in there, following the rage at parents, and then getting to a place of acceptance of, this is the hand that was dealt to me, and I've actually done pretty well. I'm a kind person. I'm a decent person. Doesn't matter if I'm the checkout person at a grocery store, or whether I drive a taxi, or whether I'm a neurosurgeon. Like, that's not what's important. What I've done is respectable, right? There's a major hurdle that I think sometimes therapists are not aware of, or we don't talk about it explicitly. And again, maybe I'm projecting what was a hurdle for me, but I don't think so. I think a lot of people, this is a huge hurdle. And so this is really the intent of this episode, is explaining this specific hurdle. And it goes something like this. This is some of the language I used when I recorded the idea for this, is that at some point, people realize that at some point in their life, what was an adaptive response to an impossible situation, and what was understandable, stopped being a trauma adaptation that helped you survive, and stopped being like, oh, well, this is a traumatized person, and actually became a lack of courage. And so you can see why, oh, that can sound like victim blaming. And again, guys, I'm saying this in reference to myself, a realization. So if you want to only apply it to me and be like, hey, John, that's you. This sounds pretty harsh. Go ahead. But I really do think that a lot of people experience this. And even once they've learned a lot of coping skills and they really recognize something very unfair happened to them, and they recognize that the first half of their life really just reflected trauma and trauma flashbacks and attempts to cope, and it's not their fault, there's this major hurdle that's difficult to get over. And there's a couple of complex things that happen. One of the things is, if you really understand complex trauma and traumatic, very difficult, very confusing childhoods, when you look at a lot of things that are not adaptive, ways that people they're super, super allergic to intimacy, or they sabotage their own relationships, or they have really difficulty focusing on things that are healthy for them, like just the myriad of ways that people sabotage themselves when they come from trauma. When they really look at and understand, there's a point at which they go, oh, I can see, and their therapist should be helping them do this, I can see how that behavior was perfectly adapted to deal with what I grew up in. And so then you can stop blaming yourself and feeling guilt and shame over why am I like this? Because it's like, that's actually a really smart adaptation, and it's a really appropriate adaptation to that environment, right? And so it makes sense that a person adapted to be that way. Let's take a super simple scenario that's not as complex. If someone is raised in a randomly, arbitrarily violent home, where it's like sometimes you can see like there's a controlling dad who's violent or a controlling mom who's violent. You can see them wrapping up. It's kind of predictable. Like, oh, they have a drinking problem, and every Friday they go out and drink and they come home. It's like, okay, there's some predictability in that. But some real personality disorder parents are arbitrary. They can be speaking nicely. My dad was not violent with me, but he would do this. He would actually speak nicely to me and draw me into a conversation. And it took me years to realize that these were gotcha conversations. He would draw me out on what I was doing, so that once I sort of opened up and described everything that I was doing in detail, he could slam it and put me down and imply that it was worthless and not really important and blah, 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 because he was outraged that I was not doing what he wanted me to do. And so, right, so you got these setups where it's like, oh, you desperately wanted your parent to be interested in it, to be nice to you. But a lot of times when my dad was nice to me, it was a setup. He had already discussed with my mom or other people in the family and was angry that what I was doing didn't make any sense and blah, blah, blah. But then when I showed up, he would speak nicely with me. And then somewhere 20 minutes in, all of a sudden the questions would become more pointed, and it would become apparent that he didn't respect what I was doing. And he had just waited until I discussed too much of it to escape the conversation. Because he could say, well, it's this and that. Well, you already said, blah, 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 and that's not going to work, right? And it's too late. I already had a policy of like, I'm not discussing anything with this asshole because all he does is put me down. But I'm desperate for my dad to be interested in me, blah, blah, blah. So sometimes when he would genuinely seem really just interested and nice, he would draw me out and I would talk about what I was doing, and then he would pile on and put it down and tell me I should be doing something else, or I should be doing more, or it's not enough, or like whatever, right? Okay, so take that template. There are people who grow up in families where it's arbitrary like that, where it's violent, where a parent will seem nice and seem connected. Like some parents are so twisted up in their attachment that they'll try to be close to their child, and then they'll get these deep, unconscious, disturbed feelings, and they'll react violently or inappropriately to their own feelings without being aware of it, and they'll attack their own child and become violent or inappropriate with them. And so it's very arbitrary. Okay, so you take that person who grows up in that environment where there was arbitrary violence, and it could come at any time, And that person could very wisely, when I say wisely, I say the way nature is wise, where it's not necessarily conscious, may become hyper vigilant and hyper aware, and they may take martial arts, and they may always be scanning their environment, and they become this person who's constantly using up all their bandwidth to be aware of possible violence. Now they move out into the world, and they may not experience anything like their family. That's a fairly exceptional situation. And so they're burning through all their bandwidth with this adaptation that's reasonable. And you go, hey man, like, nobody can judge you. You don't shame yourself. It's like, how else would a child and a young adult, they're just going to adapt and they're going to evolve. That's a wise adaptation. It's just, it doesn't work once you get away from your family, and other people are not that way. Now you're burning through all your bandwidth, being hyper aware and training yourself fiercely to be physically prepared for something that's never going to come. Like, most people are not going to randomly attack you. Then go one step further, that person's like burning through their own nervous system. They're all twitchy and they get overwhelmed and they're irritable and they have PTSD. And so sometimes they actually act violently. So now this has really become maladaptive, right? It's not adaptive. So these are things that happen for people who grow up in intense environments. They develop these deep unconscious adaptations that are appropriate, but then they grow up and they move out into the world, and the rest of the world is not their family. And all of their bandwidth is going to maintaining the system by which they relate to reality. So to get back to the point of what the hurdle is, they can look back and see and realize, oh, I don't need to shame myself. It totally makes sense that I adapted that way. In fact, I'm proud of myself. In fact, I feel a little choked up because I'm really starting to realize I'm a good person and I'm smart and I'm adaptive, and that was a reasonable adaptation for what I grew up in. And there's a realization that comes at some point, right? At first, it's like, well, they did this to me. And they struggle and they do a lot of coping, and they might do EMDR or somatic therapy, or they might do plant medicine, like whatever they choose to do to try to heal these things, while they're like, look, this was my parents' fault. It wasn't my fault. And, you know, I can hate them, I can not hate them, but this is on them. I didn't do this to myself. Here's the big hurdle. There will be a realization for them. Or maybe it's just an unconscious knowing. For me, it was a conscious realization that what was a respectable adaptation to a really vicious, abusive, inappropriate behaviors, most of them from my mom, but my dad significantly participated. Things that often my brothers and sisters didn't see, that she did in secret, and lied about, and has lied about ever since. I could look at that adaptation and go, okay, I get it, why I ended up relating to myself and the world the way I did. But here's what I had to admit. You go to therapy in your late 20s, early 30s, you spend some time figuring shit out, then you go to work on life, and then you realize I still have these significant underlying problems, and right? But at some point you realize that the reason, it may be possible that the reason you didn't realize earlier was not because this was so set in for you. The reason I call it, at some point it turns from what is an understandable adaptation to what becomes a lack of courage, is because let's say, for example, I wanted to significantly evolve at age 40 after I had a much greater understanding and blah, blah, blah. And you realize, oh, I adapted and, that's how this whole thing worked, et cetera, et cetera. It might be an instinctive unconscious level or it might be conscious, but at some point you realize or you can feel, I spent 20 or 30 years refining the ability to navigate random attacks, to build a belief system and to build a false childhood that completely lied about what my mother did. I tried to erase a bunch of very significant things that she did, significant things that my father did, tried to erase it, tried to turn it into a normal childhood. Well, I'd done all of this work. And the truth is, I had become an animal, an adapted animal of that environment. That's what I was good at. And this is why you will see people with complex PTSD will repeat things over and over and over. Now, you can have spiritual beliefs about that, and I also have spiritual beliefs about it. But within trauma, they repeat these things over and over and over because the fact is they spent a lot of time and energy and intelligence and suffering to adapt to a situation and to become experts at that situation, right? So the violent person who had that arbitrarily violent childhood is going to seek situations in which they can continue to deal with violence. They're going to go into the military, they're going to become a boxer, they're going to go into the UFC, mixed martial arts, they're going to become a police officer that goes into really rough areas and is confrontational with people, blah, blah, blah. People are going to be like, why would you do that? You hated your childhood and this was miserable and you've been to therapy. Like, why? And it's like, sometimes it's like, that's what I'm good at. That's what I learned how to do. Not just a little bit good, but fucking genius. Like, you put someone from age 0 in a really fucked up, complex, insane environment. Like, my ability to untangle insane, twisted, mixed up, logical, emotional, layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of human existential insanity to get down to what's actually true. My ability to do that is because I had to spend my entire childhood decoding these fucking mad, insane people that were my parents who talked consistently but were lying about everything. They were lying about who they were. They were lying about why they did things. They were lying. My mom was explicitly lying about very significant things that she did that if people knew, I would have been taken away by Child Protective Services. Like types of things that society doesn't allow parents to do to kids, right? I adapted to be good at navigating that shit and at sniffing out what's actually true, what's mom's real motivation, what's really going on, what's dad really pissed about, blah, blah, blah. And when I was a kid, I was stupid because I would tell him, I'd be like, you're doing this and that with me, but you're just really mad because blah, blah, blah. And what I would be saying would be often true, but it would just make them angrier because they didn't want the layers peeled back. But I developed this exceptional ability to deal with really complex emotional, psychological situations. Because my childhood was a clusterfuck of unspoken, massive truths and elephants in the room and subtle patterns that no one was going to talk about or even admit was happening. And no one was ever going to be honest about how they actually felt or what was going on until myself and my sister did. And we got both viciously attacked for doing it. Right? So here you have this person who's adapted wisely, who's developed decades of skill building, and this recovery from complex trauma requires them a couple of things that are really fucking hard. I think it may be the hardest thing to recover from complex trauma. One is you have to admit that you know a bunch of shit that's worth jack fuck nothing. Because the world is not your insane family. You have all these skills, you have all this ability to adapt, you have all of these emotions, these instinctive reactions that now people call a mental illness, and you have issues and blah, blah, blah. But it was perfectly adapted to what you grew up in. It was the appropriate response. You were configured by a situation, and then you went out into the world, and the world is like, well, that was just one tiny situation that's fucked up, and it's mentally ill, and it shouldn't have happened. But by the way, everything you know and what you know how to do and how you know to relate is bullshit. We don't want it. Go to therapy. Fix yourself. And you're like, I spent half my life becoming an expert at this. And nobody needs that. And it's not helping me. I don't want it. It makes my life miserable. It just means I have to keep pursuing the same insane bullshit. Okay, you have to get into a relationship that has the same layers of bullshit. Or you have to have friendships that have the same layers of bullshit. Or you get into work situations that nobody else would put up with. They would be looking for another job, but you put up with it for a decade because it's what you know how to do. People are always confused. They say, why do people seek? And they come up with big, complex fucking explanations. It's not a complex explanation. That person trained for their entire childhood and young adulthood to develop a significant suite of skills to deal with a situation. And so they keep going and finding the situation where they can use their fucking skills, no matter how much they hate it. It's not confusing. It's not complicated. So to recover from complex PTSD requires this terrifying moment of going, everything I learned, like 80-90% of my adaptations, my nervous system responses, the way I view reality, the way I view the world, the way I view myself, the way I believe other people are, what I believe is a loving relationship at an unconscious level, the whole fucking thing is bullshit, but it's what I'm really good at. And now here's the flip side. At the age of 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 or 70, you have to go back out into the world. And it's not just that you have to recognize that everything you learned and everything you're good at and how you're good at adapting and all your unconscious impulses is bullshit and you need to let go of it. But you're going back out into the world and you don't have any skills. You don't have any skills. You don't know how this shit works. I've watched this with myself and it makes it so fucking difficult, especially like after I became a therapist and like people treat you like you're wise and blah, blah, and I am good at what I do, right? There's a reason people pay me. There's a reason why I have a busy practice. But when it comes to just socializing or just like making a play date or I don't know how it works. I never saw it. I never experienced it. How many times do you talk with someone and feel kind of relaxed and warm before you go, man, I really love talking to you. Well, let's get the kids together and like, why don't you guys come over? Let's have dinner. Fuck, I don't know. I never saw that. And I never did it. I never experienced it. Not only that, just because I know that this is a stupid system that I'm letting go of, I still have a panic and like a feeling like these old feelings of shame of like nobody wants you and, or they're going to hurt you or like I'm still having those feelings, having to fight through that and still go, but how do people do this? What does it look like? I don't fucking know. It is entirely new. You are a baby. You're a baby, but not only are you a baby, but you're a 50-year-old baby or a 60-year-old baby or a 40-year-old baby when people expect you to know all this shit. And some of us who had really maladaptive childhoods don't know. My parents didn't socialize appropriately. They didn't socialize us appropriately. There were so many weird fucking things. By the time I was in middle school, my parents would take me to my girlfriend's house and just drop her at her fucking house. Are you taking a fucking 12-year-old full of like sex hormones and just going, well, I don't know. Yeah, sure. Spend the day with your girlfriend. When I was 16, 15, 16, the girlfriend I had after that in high school, they would drop me at her house and let me spend the fucking night. I don't know how anything works. Like, I'm telling you these specific things. And it's not to sit here and drag my parents and tell you all the horrible, stupid things they did. They did it because nobody raised them, right? They didn't know either. So I'm not telling you to try to shame them. I'm telling you because if you had a really maladaptive childhood and a really isolated childhood, which I did, a lot of us, fuck. Okay, it's really hard to let go of all of these things that you're really good at. You're really adaptive with the situation. And when I say it's not worth any, like, I have to let go of it, that's not true. A lot of my skill as a therapist and as a couple therapist helping people sort out shit is because that's what they're bringing in. That's what I know how to do. That I know how to cook it and get down to what's underneath all the bullshit. Right? So, okay, you don't have to totally throw it out. It became my job and I enjoy my job. I'm good at it. But in life in general, people are suddenly at this place where they're like 40 years old, 50 years old, 60 years old, and they don't know what to do or how to do it. It's completely new. And they can watch people, right? I can fake it, but I don't feel it. I don't know what it feels like. I don't have the moves. I don't have the instincts. It's like never playing basketball ever, and then showing up in a new situation, and everything is done socially by playing basketball, and going, well, I can see that. Okay, I'll bounce the ball. Okay, yeah, but why? I don't know. Like, when do I run down the court, or like, why am I bouncing the ball? When should I? Okay, I'll pass it. No, not him. He's on the other team. Well, fuck, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know who to pass to. I don't know what a pick and roll is. Right? In my metaphor, fuck, I don't know. I didn't have those experiences. So this is one of the biggest hurdles that no one ever talks about. I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about this. That you simultaneously have to go, oh, this, I may have incoming, guys. This suite of skills that you bled and sweat and cried and developed under duress, under severe duress, to be highly skilled at this situation, you have to go, well, that's fucking not worth anything. But then you have to turn around and go, oh, but I'm 38 and I don't know how to do anything. I don't even have the instincts. The instincts are not part of me. Like, for example, for me, my parents either put me in really inappropriate social situations, like dropping me off with my girlfriend, in which I was exposed to, I don't know, the opportunity to be sexually active or to pretend that I was more mature than I was, like at way too young of a fucking age. I mean, the second girlfriend, everybody just acted like we were married. It's fucking stupid. But you have to drop that, and then you have to look and go, how do I do? It's not just that I don't have the knowledge. I can watch other people do it, but I don't have the instincts. I kind of fumble and fake my way through and just watch what people do socially. I still struggle with like play dates or blah, 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 and parents will become kind of warm and chat me up, and I'll get scared and think, well, I don't know what to do. Should we invite them over? Or like, fuck, I don't know. I've never had these experiences. Okay, there's one more thing I'll add before I close. That's a big hurdle, right? To simultaneously let go of a whole suite of skills that you bled for, sweated for, developed, that came out of intelligence, a reasonable and a healthy adaptation, blah, blah, and suddenly it's like, it doesn't count. Throw it out. Doesn't work. Okay, it's hard. It's your entire way of being. It's what you believe about yourself. It's what you believe about reality. It's hard. It's fucking deep in unconscious. It's hard and it's painful, and that's very difficult. But you can throw that away. But then you have to turn and face reality and go, my instincts still want to go in that direction. My biology is still like, do that, do that, do that. But you have to face into the unknown at this age as an adult and go, I don't know how to do any of this. I don't know what it is. I don't know how people act. I don't know what they say. I don't know what they do. I haven't had these experiences. And now I'm going to add the other thing that, again, it might just be me. Right? Maybe it's me being harsh, but I don't think so. Also, at some point, you have to look at what was a courageous adaptation and realize that if it took you longer than you wanted, that maybe there was a lack of courage at some point. And what I mean by that is it takes courage to let go of that whole suite of skills that you have. And it takes courage to face into the unknown and go, well, fuck it, I'm just going to have to do this. If all these humans have been playing basketball, if basketball is a metaphor for how people interact socially, and all these humans have been playing since they were 0, and now they're 30 and 40, and I'm 30 and 40, and I've actually never played basketball because my entire skill set was Mortal Kombat. But now I'm supposed to play basketball. I'm supposed to be aggressive in the appropriate ways, and I'm supposed to pass when I'm supposed to pass. I'm supposed to know what these moves are, and I'm supposed to be able to handle the ball, and I'm supposed to be blah, blah, blah. Like, but I don't know. I can't do any of it. I don't know. I don't have the instinct for it. Even when I watch other people and go, okay, I get it. Okay, I see how that works, but I don't have the instincts. My body doesn't move that way. Like someone bumps me in the basketball court, and immediately I want to punch them, or I want to run, or I want to trip them, or like, right? It's going back to the combat thing, but I'm supposed to just go foul, foul, foul. That instinct isn't there. The instinct is to punch them or run away. I'm just working with the metaphor, right? It takes courage to face into that. So what was a realization for me was, hey, this took over half your life. To go, I need to let go of these things. To recognize, okay, it was an intelligent adaptation. I'm not ashamed for developing, basically what was a CIA mentality. Like everything was about information, and everything was about control of information, and everything was about reading and figuring out what the truth was, because the information was never going to contain it. It was always going to be passively hidden in there. The information was always a fent within a fent within a fent, right? It was Game of Thrones on a psychological level. It was Game of Thrones on a psychological level. So at some point you have to look at this and go, part of why it took me so long was a lack of courage. Maybe I would have seen it sooner if I had been more courageous, if I had been willing to go, fuck it, just drop this shit, face into the unknown, be a babe in the woods, let people be confused about why you don't know shit. And now I'm 58 and I still don't know shit about lots of stuff because I held on to that I kept trying to find ways to use that old skill system. Or maybe I'm just shaming myself. But those are the two things, right? So I started by saying, there's a couple of things that create a really massive hurdle for people with complex PTSD to get through the last stages of healing and move on with their life. And nobody ever talks about it. So now I'm identifying it. One is you have to let go of a suite of skills that you poured an enormous amount of time and energy into developing. The rest of society looks at that and it's like, oh, it's you know, oh, it's totally understandable why you would, that's terrible, they should never, but they still see it as an aberration, right? As if you had developed a sickness because your family was sick. But you know at some level that you had adapted in a healthy, intelligent way and developed very significant skills in the face of that insanity. And now people want to call it sick. And you don't want to call it sick. You want to be like, it doesn't work now, but fuck, it was smart. The way I developed and the complexities I developed and you know, the CIA mentality was an intelligent response. And it's mine. I did, right? I did that. I want some credit. But it's like, no credit. So you have to let go of that. Then you have to turn innocent, confused. You're less than innocent because an innocent doesn't have unconscious responses configured in. Like their instincts aren't built in yet. But you have instincts for that old system. And those don't go away for decades. For some people, little bits of them don't ever go away. Right? Someone like Mike Tyson may have an instinct for violence for his entire life. He struggles with that and he finds a relationship to it that's healthy and kind and loving and right, spiritual. I love what he's done, man. I love that dude. What he's done with an incredibly violent and difficult childhood. He's really an amazing human. But I'm pretty sure he's going to deal with having a first initial instinct for violence for the rest of his life. Right? So the instinct doesn't go away. So you have to face into the unknown going, I have these old instincts, they don't go away, and I have to try to invent a way into or be a babe in the woods and figure out a way to move forward into the unknown with a bunch of people who have already been working at this system their entire lives, who are like, I don't know, that dude doesn't seem to like, what the fuck is wrong with him? Like, how could he not know? Well, we didn't all get what other people got, right? So that's right. And then the second piece is looking at it and going, oh, maybe it was a lack of courage. Maybe I would have been willing to move into that younger. Maybe I would have been willing to see it and to go, you're going to have to let this go and you're going to have to face into the unknown. That there's nothing else. It doesn't matter. You're going to take this huge hit, but it doesn't matter. You have to do it. There's nothing else to be done, right? That my adaptation and my use of that adaptation for so long may reflect a lack of courage. Now that may or may not be true, but that's hard to look at. So that's another part of that last hurdle. Letting go of a suite of highly developed skills, moving into the unknown where your instincts still serve those old skills in that old situation. So being a babe in the woods at an age when most people are like, why would you be a babe in the woods? But also having to go, maybe I could have been more courageous and done this sooner, seen it sooner. Maybe I hid it from myself because I lacked courage. That is a big hurdle for folks with really serious, complex PTSD. And some people face into it at 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80. Some people never. But I just want to tell you, fuck this Zoom thing. I don't know how I turned it on and I can't find how to turn it off. I'll have to figure it out now. I want to tell you, I understand. Don't shame yourself if you spent well over half your life or 2/3 of your life. It's an incredibly unjust situation. You developed through high intelligence and adaptability and strength an ability, a suite of abilities that ceased to be applicable the moment you left your family. And then because most childhood programming is unconscious, you didn't know, And so you kept trying to use that system, and you kept turning everything into that kind of situation, whether it was or not, or you sought those situations out. If you were raised in violence, you sought violence. If you were raised in psychological insanity, you sought psychological insanity. If you were raised in depression and hopelessness, you seek depression. Like whatever it is, you did that because it's what you knew how to do. It's what your instincts knew how to respond to. And then you heal and you go through this awakening where you realize this suite of skills is not going to serve me. I have to let them go. That's painful and it's difficult. And when you let them go, you realize I'm an adult, or maybe a mature or elder adult who has no fucking idea how any of this works. And you have to face into that and go, I guess I got to take the hit. Because like, what else is there to do? And you got to do that while questioning, if I had seen this younger, maybe I would have had more time to live life expansively with love for myself, with curiosity, with joy. Maybe there would have been more time. That's a big and very, very painful hurdle. And if you're not there yet, God bless, you're going to get there. I believe in you, and I know how difficult recovery from complex PTSD is. It's so difficult. It tears you down to the core of nothing. You're left with no beliefs about self other than, I'm fucked up, I don't know what to do. I love you, I respect you for that. And you are going to get there. And when or if you get there, be kind to yourself. Because what's really happened for you is you were stripped down to nothing. And when you were stripped down to nothing, you begin to know things that the rest of the human race hides from themselves. Because as long as they have things that they believe about themselves, and they believe that they're smarter than they are, and they believe that they're stronger than they are, because they were given situations where they didn't get stripped down to zero. And they were given tools that are reasonably adaptive that they're able to use their entire lives. But the fact that they use them in their entire lives means they never wake up and realize this is all bullshit. We're just inventing systems, and we're often doing it at the extreme detriment of other populations, animals, of the earth, blah, blah, blah. And you see it and you know it. But you see it and you know it, and you know how full of shit it is exactly because you got stripped down to nothing. That's why you see it. And some other people do see it, but they just pay lip service. They're like, yeah, it's not good. Yeah, but you know, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we probably shouldn't eat meat. We do, but we probably shouldn't eat meat. Like, whatever, shut the fuck up. I'm down for you, the people who have walked that path, or are walking that path and feel hopeless and feel like everything I learned how to do has to be thrown out, and I have to head into life stripped down to nothing. In fact, less than nothing, because my instincts are still going to follow that old programming, and I have to counterbalance those instincts and move into the unknown without knowing. But that being stripped down to nothing and moving into the unknown without knowing makes you a person capable of looking around at the world and seeing how deeply, deeply, deeply full of shit the entire system is. And I don't mean the earth, and I don't mean animals, I don't mean every human, but I mean everything we set up. Religion, politics, industrial farming, testing makeup on beagles, torturing monkeys to see what happens if, giving animals look, it's entirely and utterly full of shit and sick, and you know it, and I know it, and they're going to bullshit themselves, they're going to mealy mouth, because the system that's full of shit allowed them to have a life that's comfortable enough that they're never going to stand up and go, this is fucking bullshit. This is wrong, and I'm going to say it. And you can go, well, but you know, now shut up. You have that skill because you're on that path. I'm down for you. I love you. I respect you. I know that you can do this and that you are doing it. And if you're not there yet, you're going to come to that point where you realize you have to give it all away. You have to face into the unknown. And you will question yourself. Could I have been more courageous? Truth is, probably not. because I think you are courageous. I think you are courageous. And being stripped down to nothing makes you a very, very important voice. I love you guys. Talk to you next time. Take care.
Just for today, everything's okay, everything's okay.